right, welcome back. It's your VOP this morning on Voice of the People television. Before that break, we're trying to tell you what Peter Obi, who happened to be the presidential candidate of the Labour Party in 2023 election, said. He called on the federal government to de-accelerate its borrowing, while an assessment of what the previous loans have been used for should be looked into to stem the tide of increasing debt profile. Speaking through his verified X handle, Obi described the Nigerian government's borrowings as unproductive, with public debt increasing with little or no impact on the country's economy. His reaction followed the country's debt profile released by the Debt Management Office (DMO) last week, which reveals that Nigeria's public debt increased by 10%, hitting 97.3 trillion naira by the end of the 2023. The former Anambra State governor blamed that the last administration for incurring huge debt, especially with the 30 trillion naira ways and means from the central bank, which according to him could have ended the nation's borrowing, but the debt failed to yield value addition to the country's economy. And our guest today, we have Mr. Segun Shopmeton, who is the chairman, Accountability, Candor and Transparency Network for Political Discussion. And also we have Mr. Chukwuma Okoro, who is a journalist and a public affairs commentator. They'll be joining us virtually. Mr. Chukwuma Okoro is here already. Good morning, Mr. Chukwuma.
Good morning.
Okay, it's good to have you again today on the show.
Thank you.
All right, now, Mr. Chukwuma, I would like to ask you, what do you make of Obi's call as regards the 10% increase of Nigeria's servicing debt, which happened to be or has increased to 97.3 trillion naira as of the end of 2023?
Okay, the fact that it is Mr. Peter Obi, who is a political figure, non-political figure, that made this call doesn't change the facts of the matter, because even Moses in the studio, David in the studio, or you who have still asked the same thing, because it's common knowledge. It's common knowledge to Nigerians that our debt, our borrowing is quite unproductive. And if you look at what is happening, we don't need a Mr. Peter Obi to do that. Any other discerning Nigerian could have as well done that, and it will sit well with, but just Nigerians, but the people who are leading us. It's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that we are going this way. You recall that during the Obasanjo regime, which is about less than 16 years ago, we had a debt forgiveness. The Paris and the London clubs forgave our debts up to the tune of 30-point-something billion dollars. At that time, we came out clean. And look at what has happened. As of December, according to the Debt Management Office, which is a government debt management agency, has come out to say, look, our national debt profile is 93.7 trillion naira. 97.3 trillion naira. And to make matters worse, the thing is growing at a rate, like the last time it grew at 10%, and that 10% is like 9.7 trillion, which was even used to service debts. But beyond that, the growth goes in such a way that in our four critical areas, defense, education, hospitality, and which other one, the debt growth at a rate that that is much more than our budgetary allocation to each of those sectors. It's disturbing. It's very, very disturbing. Let us use what is happening in Kaduna State as a test case. Last month, I think February, Kaduna State government got 10 billion naira from FAC, Federation Allocation Account Committee. Out of that 10 billion naira, 7.5 billion was deducted as source. To do what? To pay debts incurred by the previous administrations in Kaduna State. And the governor is saying, hey, look, my people, I can't even pay salaries. What's going on? How come we are exposed to this level of debt? I can't even pay salaries. And to make matters worse again, These monies are not borrowed for critical infrastructure. It is not borrowed to fix our electricity. It is not borrowed to build education. It is not borrowed to build hospitals. It is not borrowed to fund tourism that will make more money. It is not borrowed to fund manufacturing. What did we use this money to do?
How many times will you be asking question?
Who is that?
Well, we do
No,
apologize
no,
for that.
apologize for that.
We do
Go on.
apologize for that. Go on, please. It's
Okay.
an
Okay.
interference.
So this money, like Peter B said, the debts are unproductive. We didn't use them to fund critical infrastructure like super highways, like the coastal rail line that the current president is trying to build. We didn't use all that money to do that. What did we use the money to do? We borrowed this money. These monies were stolen. Were stolen by who? By the operators in government. Look at what happened. The first loan that was borrowed by this administration, 200 billion naira. They yanked off 70 billion naira, gave it to members of National Assembly to do what? To retrofit their offices and wardrobes. 70 billion naira in a country where the average Nigerian can't go to a general hospital and get treated and buy ordinary essential drugs. They gave out 70 billion naira to legislators to do what? To retrofit their offices and wardrobes in a country where school children still study in dilapidated buildings. University students are lectured in cramped halls. What the hell is going on? And we expect that things will get better. Things will never get better. So what Peter Obi is saying is a clarion call to each and every one of us. And just recently, I think about less than 2 months ago, the president still approached the Senate to do what? To borrow funds. Do we factor these things? What is our debt ratio to our GDP? Do we factor in all these things? Do we have policymakers who sit down and look at these things? Because from the way we are going, we will get to a point where by the time the international community takes off at source what accrues to our national treasury, we will be in a situation where we are unable to meet very, very primary obligations. That was how the Euro crisis, the Eurozone crisis started with Greece, with Cyprus, with Ireland unable to pay their national debts. Even the World Bank and IMF could not touch their debts with a very long pole. That was what led to it. Do we have to wait until we get to that level? So my thoughts are that, look, what Peter Obi said is a clarion call. He made a clarion call, and it doesn't take a Peter Obi to do that. If you open the website of the Debt Management Office, anybody who can read and write and understand elementary economics will also say that.
All right, then. All right, we've been made to understand that we also have another guest. Well, he's supposed to be our studio guest, but he's caught in traffic, and he'll be joining virtually up until he gets into the studio. We're talking about Mr. Segun Shukbito, who is Chairman, Accountability, Candor, and Transparency Network for Political Discussions. Well, good morning to you, Segun. Welcome to the conversation. Now, we've said that regardless of who talked about Nigeria's debt profile at the moment, the fact is it's a major concern. And some people will say everybody borrows, all right? Even America is borrowing. But what is the issue with Nigeria's borrowing? Is it that it's not being used for the things it's meant to be used for? Or is it mismanagement of it? Or what exactly is the problem here with Nigeria's increase in debt profile?
Thanks for having me again. Good morning to all viewers.
Welcome.
Look, it's a very simple matter, in my opinion. If you borrow, I think Mr. Peter Obi has actually captured the issue as succinctly as is possible. It's the productivity of the spend that I think that the problem is. So like you said, there's nothing wrong with borrowing. In fact, some would argue that if you want to develop quickly, if you want to grow quickly, you leverage. You use the principle of leverage. Leverage is you using other people's resources, other people's abilities other people's abilities to help you achieve your own objectives in as quick a time as possible. So
All right, there's a
when
glitch.
you apply that to the finance, the more you allow people's money to your projects, the faster you're able to achieve your developmental objectives. So I think the challenge for us in Nigeria is that we are borrowing, but we are not leveraging the debt. The debt that we are accumulating is not being applied to productive activities. It's not being applied to things that will generate the required economic output that will pay those debts off. The United States of America is probably the most indebted country in the world. Japan is extremely indebted. In terms of debt to GDP ratio, those countries are trending well above 100% of debt to GDP. Up until 2015, Nigeria was trending at about 5% debt to GDP. Under the Buhari administration, we've gotten up to about 20% debt to GDP. So you find that in terms of debt to GDP ratio, we're still it's not a bad number to look at.
Okay.
There are two problems with our own debt profile. One is that it's not productive, like Mr. Peter Obi said. We're not using it to fund projects that will drive development. And the second is that we do not have the capacity to pay those loans. So our revenue profile as a country is so terrible that we are unable to meet our debt service obligations from our revenues. So if you now do a different metric and say, what is your revenue, debt to revenue ratio, debt service obligation to revenue ratio, we've actually had it. In other words, our total revenue, the total revenue of the federal government, was used to pay our debt obligations, and they still had to borrow to pay the rest. We've had that situation in the past, So I think that is a problem. It's a situation that is clearly unsustainable and has to be dealt with. It's either you are going to increase your debt, your revenue profile, or you stop borrowing and look for other ways to finance your projects.
All right. Now, I'm going to still stay with you, Mr. Shegun. At this point, I did hear you mention some countries that, their debt to GDP ratio is quite alarming. And you mentioned Japan, you mentioned the USA. When we look at these countries, we cannot in any way try to equate their development, particularly infrastructural development, as to what we have in Nigeria. That's one. Now, my question is very simple. Sometime in 2022, a former minister, Hadi Sirika, told Nigerians that we were going to have a national carrier. Now, a few days before they left office, he came up with one major revelation of a jet. We know the story. Let's not even go back and forth. Till date, nothing has been said about that situation and the trillions of naira that went into that. Now, my question is very simple. Is Nigerians the major problem of themselves, particularly to the fact that we're docile and not talking to the situation? Not just journalists and not just broadcasters like us here say anything about this, but including the House of Rep members who are supposed to be representing the people. Does this mean that we are docile, or is there no political will to even correct all of these anomalies that we find in our economy and, of course, within the political elites at this point?
So this issue that you raise is actually one of the biggest problems that we have as a country. I am a civil society person, and one of the mandates that my organization, Accountability, Candor, and Transparency Network, carries is a mandate to drive engagement, to drive citizen engagement with the public process, with the governance process. And I have always said on every single platform that I've had the opportunity to speak that you cannot have good governance and development without active citizen engagement. It is impossible. Look, Nigerians must understand this. Let me borrow the words of our current president and amend his statement a bit. have said that good governance is not delivered a la carte. You have to fight for it. You have to grab it. You have to run away with it. Good governance.
You just added yours to it.
What?
You just added the good to it.
So yes, you have to fight for good governance. You've got to struggle for good governance. You have to do everything it takes to ensure that political leadership delivers good governance to you as a citizenship. So now that mandate falls on the fourth estate of the realm. That's you guys, the press. It falls on ordinary Nigerians. It falls on civil society, who must lead the charge, because somebody must lead this. If we check other countries around the world, the United States, the UK, the EU, I love giving the example of France. Look, when the government sneezes and the citizens are unhappy with the direction of the sneeze, they hit the streets and protest, and their protests are very quick. They are very, very volatile in those countries. If they do not like what the government is doing, they protest. They immediately voice their displeasure. So the government is kept on its toe, and they are afraid. The government is actually afraid of the people. Nigerians and Nigeria must get to that stage where citizens demand what they want from government, and government is afraid of the citizens. Right now, we're very far from it. So you find that, for example, on this issue of debt, look, this debt that has been accumulated, it's been accumulated to be paid by you and I through our taxes, and by our children and their own children. What are we saying about it? Nothing. Nobody is protesting. The NLC comes out and talks about their salaries, but they don't deal with this fundamental governance-related issues. And I think that is a problem that Nigerians need to pay attention to.
Okay, Mr. Shegu, now I have to go to Mr. Chukuma Okoro for this one. While Mr. Shegu was talking, he made mention of the people of Nigeria becoming more involved.
Yes,
and then,
not for, because
can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
All right, Mr. Chukuma, okay. No, Mr. Shegu was of the opinion that Nigerians need to get more involved, but we also saw what played out when NLC decided to protest about the untold hardship Nigerians are facing, and even the minimum wage not being carried out, and what the president said about that. But my question to you is this. Is it that the Nigerians are not participating or acting effectively to this, or is it that the political elites actually are not, being fair to Nigerians? Why I ask this question is this. The senator representing Kogi West, I'm talking about Sunday Karimi, was of the opinion that the former administration, actually left so much debt for this present administration. And not just that, we also heard that we're using so much amount of, let's say, 10 trillion naira now to service debt. And apart from that, we also know that when the issue of the 30 trillion naira means and ways were raised up in the National Assembly, some political elites in there representing Nigeria were of the opinion that we should let that be for the meantime. I'm talking about the president of the Senate, Ababio himself, saying that that should not really come up for the meantime, that they can review it later, treating it to be like maybe it's not really a big thing to look at. And when Senator Nengi talked about padding of budget, adding a certain amount of money to the budget, he was suspended. Is it that there's something that the political elite don't want us to see as Nigerians, or what do you have to say?
In 1983, that's about 41 years ago, one of Africa's best sons, Professor Chinua Achebe, wrote a book. The title of the book was The Trouble with Nigeria. And in page 4 of that book, he said, the problem with Nigeria rests squarely on leadership. The problem of Nigeria rests squarely on leadership. 41 years after he wrote that book, we are still battling with that problem of leadership. Nigeria's problem rests squarely on leadership. If you don't have good leaders, it is very, very difficult for you to have good followers. That is it. Shegu cited the instance of France, where the citizens are spontaneous in their reaction. If the leadership sneezes with the wrong policy, the people troop out on the streets to say, no, we don't want this. You know why people in France do that? Because their system protects them, that in the process of a protest, in the process of a demonstration, you get injured, the state is going to treat you. In the process of a protest, you get killed, the person that killed you will be held to account. Justice will be served. Your family, the family that you left behind, will be taken care of by the state. Can we, in all honesty, say that about Nigeria? No. Nigerians are very reactive too. When you make policies that they don't like, what do? They troop out. We've had major protests. We had the Lagos lockdown. We had the Alemos go. Over time, we have had protests. But what happened? Look at what happened in 2020 about NSAS. Nigerian youths trooped out. And soldiers were commanded to come and kill them. Up until today, nothing has come out of that, of the investigation. We are going back and forth. And government secretly wants to go and bury the victims, even when the same government denied that there were no victims. So what do you want Nigerians to do, to come out and be killed? That is not going to happen. It just happens once in a while. And the kind of leadership we have now is that even if you protest from now till tomorrow, they will not do anything. So the problem is squarely on leadership. Look at what is going on in the National Assembly. We have a National Assembly that parts budget, and when one of its own says, no, look at what we are doing is not right, what does he do? What does he get? Islamic suspension on him. So for people like Senator Karimi, what they are doing is just to protect. They want to protect the status quo because they are the ones benefiting from it. They are the ones benefiting from it. Since Akpabio became Senate president, we have seen the infractions, on the Nigerian citizenry, the poor people. Look at how they are sharing money. Look at how they are padding budgets. Look at how they are giving themselves ZIP, zonal intervention projects, and constituency projects that don't see the light of the day. Look at what the National Assembly members do in NDDC. They corner all the contracts and nothing comes out of it. Nigeria's problem is squarely the problem of corruption. And the issue we are discussing now rests squarely on corruption. If we had borrowed 97.3 trillion naira and the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway is not motorable as it is now, somebody should answer questions, but we haven't seen that. If we have borrowed 97.3 trillion naira and we don't have a national carrier in the name of Nigeria Airways, up until today, the people everybody surrounding that infraction is still at home. AICC invites people today, they release them tomorrow. It's all rests on the shoulder of leadership. What I will align myself with Sheikh is that we need the civil society people to re-engage Nigerians. We need the civil society organization to reinvent itself. I said the other time, we had a more vibrant civil society organization during the dark days of the military. That was when we saw the Olisa Bakobas, the Ransom Kutis, the Clement One, Kwadenas and Chukuma, all of them, the Ayobe, and the rest of them, they came out, they trooped out, they said no. Most of them were daggered, most of them were shot. Olisa's eye was almost blinded by the military somewhere in Yaba. But they stood their ground. But we have a civil society organization today that's more like issuing press releases and all whatnot. That is not going to solve our problem.
All right, then.
Another way we can hold our leaders to account is to ensure that we vote the right people. Shegun made try to paraphrase our president when he said that good governance, you run with it, you grab it, you snatch it. Unfortunately, that was not what the president meant. The president meant snatching with power, with ballot papers, rigging. That's actually what he meant. And look at what we got. Because some people ran with, snatched it, grabbed it, snatched it, and ran with it. And this is what we are running with. Everybody's now running along. So let's be circumspect in what we put out to the public. Let's be very circumspect about what we put out to the public.
All right. Then.
Yes, I agree that the civil society organizations need to reinvent themselves. They need to be more proactive. But beyond that, our constituents back home should also hold their leadership to account. If you ask me, in all honesty, there is no reason why Abdul Ningi should be suspended. And look at what Jaribe did with Arise Television the other day. He said, I don't want Wahala because he's scared. He's scared. He can't speak up again, and he's presenting a whole senatorial zone in Cross River State.
Nigerians are being muscled into keeping quiet. The the powers that be has made it in such a way that you can't even protest, you can't even use words, you can't even complain. So Nigerians are basically being shut up as it is. Oh well, there are a few countries. I had a list with me a while ago. There are a few countries. We're still talking the debts and having to borrow. Shagun joins us in the studio now. Thank you very much for your time. We do appreciate it.
Good to be here
All right.
physically.
Yes. Now, Chukwuma has talked about civil society groups. One very active civil society organization is the SERAP right now. But SERAP is having to do a whole lot of court cases because this is a democratically elected government. That's what we practice. How effective has that been by your analysis in terms of fighting for the rights of Nigerians and putting government on its toes?
I think in responding to that question, we have to be careful not to belittle the work that SERAP is doing, because let's be honest, and I'm a civil society person. I head a civil society organization. And then you tell me what
your organization is also doing.
Exactly. So SERAP has done an awesome job in that space, in the approach they have adopted, which is to go to court, because the gentleman that heads SERAP is a lawyer, and that's what he knows to do. And I think it's important. Unfortunately, just like you say, in terms of effectiveness, maybe because of our history of military rule, our government officials simply believe that might is right, and they can cherry pick which court judgments to obey. So SERAP has gotten, I can't even begin to count the number of court orders and injunctions, and judgments and rulings against the government, compelling government to take one form of action or the other, or not to take some action or the other, and the government has completely ignored almost every single one of those things. The examples abound. So you begin to question the effectiveness of that. But I say we have to be careful because, it's important that something continues to be done. Because on the timelines of history, it will be on record that these judgments were obtained, but the government did not obey them. So that's good. It's a good thing to be done. And they must continue. Other civil society organizations are also doing a number of things. In my organization, what we do, our name is Accountability, Candor, and Transparency Network. So we hold the issue of public accountability and transparency very critical. And what we do is that we reach out to government organizations to demand explanations for, especially when it comes to public accountability on public finance. So on a number of occasions, we've written to government to ask for explanations on some projects that have been done. Our last intervention was on Lamata. So we wrote to Lamata to demand an explanation on the cost of the blue line and the red line. Fantastic initiative as those initiatives might be, how much has it cost the citizens? It's important that the citizens of Lagos State, for example, know how much money was spent on this, so we can know whether what happened there was in the overall public interest in terms of cost versus benefits. So if we say, they've responded, but we have not received the response yet. So they've responded to us to say we should come pick up, the response, and we're going to do that. When we get that, we will put it to the public space and let the people know, look, this is what the government is saying they spent on this. These types of interventions must continue to happen. Because if we don't, like I was saying...
Will this type of intervention bring the change that is required?
Inevitably and eventually, but it will not bring it right now. Oh. It will take time. And you see, this is the thing about nation building. There are no shortcuts. So what we are going through now, one of my colleagues in ACT Network would always say that every single democracy that we look at today and admire have been through this phase we're going through now. It's just that they did theirs 200 years ago, 150 years ago. They've walked their journey, they're where they are now. We have the opportunity to leapfrog. We don't have to take 200 years to get there. So the questions we need to ask ourselves in the press, in the civil society, and as citizens is what more can we do to accelerate the developmental process through our engagement? But our engagement is important. When I said wrong with it and all that. I think Chukuma may have misunderstood me. I was actually rephrasing the president to say, look, instead of saying power is not given a la carte, we must also understand that good governance is not given a la carte. Nobody is going to, there is no government anywhere in the world that does good for the public good just because they want to. They do good for the public good because people demand it and they're afraid of the people. If they don't do it, they'll be voted out. You know, so we need to address all of those things. Of course, there's the electoral process that we know the electoral process, we know where it is. Yeah. You know, so our problems are really multivariate and.
All right, I'm still going to stay with you. So, a couple of minutes ago, before we got into the main conversation during our newspaper review, there was this headline that was quite alarming. The headline, of course, is in the Daily Trust, where the major headline reads: electricity tariff to rise by 300%. Now, from 68 naira to 200 naira per unit. Now that is extremely unbelievable in a nation where we are not even producing, quote unquote. Now, my question is, Mr. Peter Obi has come out to say our debt is self-inflicted. Basically, I'm trying to paraphrase now. In all of this, Nigerians are still the ones that will continually bear the brunt. What should Nigerians do? Now, not leaving away the duty of the fourth keepers of the realm, that is us, or even your group, the civil society organizations. What should Nigerians do? The woman selling pepper and tomato on the street, the woman selling cold drinks, and even, of course, all of these frozen foods that would need this power. Of course, we know the power is not even there. I'm talking about power supply now. It's not even there. What should they do, knowing all of this is coming to the fold, and of course they will be the one bearing the brunt?
You know, I have two examples to answer that question. Two things have happened in recent history. Last year we had a cash crunch, you know, when the CBN did the currency redesign thing. Yeah. And that hit Nigerians so badly, and so fundamentally that they hit the streets. It was spontaneous. There was no civil society leading it. You just found protests erupting in different parts of the country. All over the country, you know, and it was almost simultaneous, within a range of about a 2-day period. Nigerians hit the streets. Why? Their very existence was threatened. They couldn't get money to buy food, so they hit the streets. Okay. It happened again this year with the food cost of living crisis, and then you found that Niger State, you know, all over the country, people hit the streets spontaneously. And then this government was saying, oh, it's the opposition and other. It wasn't the opposition, it was Nigerians, it was human beings whose existence was being threatened. You know, so they had to react. We've got to get to the point where people do that. With this tariff increase, people might not understand what this means. 300% tariff increase will hit us as badly as the fuel subsidy removal hit us. You know, because like you say, you know, at the moment, so people, the average household, if you have a prepaid meter, and it's, let's say, a 3 to 4 bedroom flat, you're probably spending about 20,000 naira per month on a prepaid meter. It means that with this increase, you are going to be spending almost 100,000 per month for electricity alone. Now, for goodness sake, how much salary can you possibly be earning that will enable you afford 100,000 naira per month just for electricity that you are not even getting?
They're not even getting. That's
right.
You know, so it's a huge conundrum, and I think that when that reality hits, Nigerians will hit the streets. One thing I'm beginning to understand is that, yes, like Chukuma was saying earlier, there are reasons why we don't protest. There is the threat to life issue. There is the fact that the system doesn't protect you.
And there's also the ethnic
and all of those divides, you know, the divides that prevent us from uniting to protest together. You know, but when the push comes to shove, Nigerians hit the streets. So when this one happens, if they do it, I would advise, like we were shouting, I spoke relentlessly on air, you know, in the course of last year to say, you cannot take subsidies out. You cannot. If you do it, you will throw the country into chaos. Here we are today. We're still trying to find our way back from the chaos that subsidy removal and the floating of the naira created. Yeah. And now we want to add this one again. It will be calamitous.
All right then. Let's. I know Chukuma would want to react to that headline as well, but we have to go into the second topic. If you want to, you could react when we come back. Now, we'll be talking about politicking going on ahead of the 2027 elections when we come back from this break. Stay with us.